All right. Welcome to the Experience Better video podcast series. We're at the Children's Rehab Center here in Kearney. Josh Beekler, PT, and Emilie Reason with us today, another physical therapist who specializes in pediatrics and seeing kids. And special guest today, Kai, who's approaching 8 months. He'll be 8 months old tomorrow. But the reason Kai is here today is we're going to talk about him having a flat head. So what's the medical term for that?
So it'd be plagiocephaly. So just a big fancy word to say you have a flat head.
Sure. And so how does that happen?
Most often it's positioning. So especially after the back to sleep campaign, where it was found that if you put your baby on the back to sleep, then they didn't die of sudden infant death syndrome. So that's a good thing.
Right.
But it causes flat heads.
Right.
It can also be when they're still inside the womb, that it's a cramped environment that they can get a flat head. But most often it's because they're laying on their back more often than they ever used to. So we're seeing an increase in it.
Sure. So I'll say some background. So we noticed it pretty early on. He was probably 3 or 4 months old and laying on his back all the time, and it was just the left side would get really flat, and it's really hard because you lay him down and he sleeps, and it's just like he just falls right into it, and as he grew, his head's like, of course, in the 90th percentile, so maybe that's makes it a little tougher too, but it kind of just kept getting flatter and flatter, and we so what are common interventions? What are common strategies to prevent, if you start to notice it, what can you do?
So PT is actually one of the most common ways. So when you start to notice it, you can get a PT eval. And what we really work on is positioning, especially tummy time is one of the most important ones.
Sure.
I think there's a suggestion that you get 81 minutes a day in tummy time by the time they're 4 months old. Okay. So quite a bit of tummy time. It doesn't have to be all at one time, obviously, but a little bit at a time. Also working on, so if he's always looking to his left, trying to find things, make him look to his right.
Sure.
Laying on his side. You can find like towels or positioners, so especially if he's kind of just taking a nap or resting, putting a towel under one side so he has to look a different direction.
Sure.
To give some relief off of the flat side and kind of put pressure on different parts.
Sure.
If he has any muscle tightness, torticollis is a common thing that goes with plagiocephaly. So if they do have the tight muscles, you can work on some stretching.
Sure.
And making sure there's not any limitations there.
Very good. Yeah, so we kind of got to the point where it was really flat. And those things we were trying just didn't seem to help us all that much. Made some improvement, but we were still a little bit concerned. So kind of what's the next step after that?
If that's not working, a helmet. Usually they refer kids before 6 months or at 6 months.
Yep.
That's when it's most effective.
Yep.
So usually between 4 and 6 months is when they get a helmet, and there's usually some excellent benefits.
Yep. So we actually did that. So when Kai was about 6.5 months old, we ended up, to your point, you got to do it early. We were like, well, we can keep trying all these things, but we were kind of getting a little bit nervous about it. So we ended up going ahead and going with a helmet. So Kai wears his helmet about 23 hours a day, and we've really seen some incredible improvements. And haven't we, buddy? Yeah, you're doing great. So this is actually a picture. I'm going to bring it up to the camera a little bit closer. But what you can see is this top part was the front of his head, and the back part and the bottom part was the back of his head about a month ago, and now the dotted line is where we're at currently. So he's definitely expanding the back of his head, and you can just visually see it as well. Here, take a puff break here. But you can even just see how much better it looks, and we're really pleased with how it's coming and how he's doing with it. So do you know, how does that helmet work?
So I think what they do, take an outline of basically what his head is and where it should be.
Right.
And then as his head continues to grow, it can grow into the open spaces of the helmet.
Right.
So it's not constricting anything,
right,
but lets it grow correctly.
Right. So the space for him in the back was a little bit open and is allowing his head to actually kind of grow into that space a little bit, so that he has kind of a normal round head instead of the shelf on the back of the head you had before. So he made a nice coaster, but probably not a good long-term, because what are some of the long-term effects associated with plagiocephaly?
So initially there's like the gross motor delay. So if they're always looking to one direction, maybe they aren't turning both directions when they're turning, or they aren't crawling yet, or some of those skills that they should have are sometimes delayed, or it's asymmetrical, so they're doing it to one side but not the other.
Sure.
And there are some studies that even into school age, they're showing some deficits in like strength and running and jumping compared to like their peers.
Sure.
And even some cognitive deficits. Most of them were still in the average range in the study I had seen, but they were still a little bit on the lower end.
Sure. Yep.
Especially if they didn't have it corrected.
Right.
And if they were in that moderate to severe range.
Right.
And it wasn't, no interventions were performed. So.
Yep. Very good. Yeah. So that's kind of why we decided to go ahead and go with the helmet, just because we didn't want to have any long-term effects. But the smarter thing would have been was to get you to see Emilie sooner and deal with this sooner. But even me as a PT, I don't see a lot of kids, but we just kind of thought, oh, he'll grow out of this. But I think it's important for people to know that the earlier you see this, the sooner you should maybe get on it, talk to your doctor, talk about physical therapy, maybe being as a much cheaper option than what the helmet is. But yeah, he's doing really well, and I'll even show you the helmet doesn't bother him. Now he's probably gonna cry when I put it on this time, but he doesn't normally. It's usually because I catch his ear in it, but it just fits right over top of him like that. You just make sure everything's lined up. You don't even have to, you don't pull it tight. You just kind of strap it closed, and then he's got a super cool looking helmet that you can get all kinds of stickers on the internet and stuff like that for. So
there you go.
So that's it. So doesn't seem to bother. It doesn't bother him at all. He actually even sleeps in it. He wears it about 23 hours a day now, and you just watch for signs of pressure and that kind of stuff. But we've been really fortunate so far. So, well, thanks, Emilie, for sharing all that information with us. And I've certainly learned a lot from you about this and in our journey with this in his now normally rounding head. But yeah, no, thank you very much, and thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.